managers, HR peoples, owners, and etc. What red flags can an employee notice before they are fired? If they start addressing issues over email when previously they'd do so in person, that's them gathering documentation. One person said less emails. You say more emails. I don't know what to believe. When I was about to get the axe due to layoffs, I had my editor come up to me and ask what I was working on. Oh, I got some articles on the pipeline and some quick revisions. Can you give me a list of everything you are working on? Sure. I guess I should be glad I have to submit a full task list every single week so I can't be paranoid about this. Your workload will get lighter and lighter. You'll complete projects and no new projects will be given to you. OBV. This is so that, when it comes time to drop the axe, there will be minimal transitioning needed for works in progress. Also, that new guy who was hired to help you out, he's your replacement. At an hourly job, if they stop putting you on the schedule, make you only work 1 or 2 shifts a week, you're probably about to be fired. One of my managers was a fan of not telling people that they were about to be fired and then not putting them on any shifts for 2 weeks. If the person didn't ask her what was happening and why they weren't scheduled to work for the next 2 weeks, she just never put them on another shift again. If they asked her what was up, that was the only time that she would talk to them about their performance, and she'd either fire you or give you another chance. Maybe signs of a general layoff more than you're specifically being fired, but when the company starts cutting back on things and generally letting itself go, firing the janitors and going with a temp service once a week, equipment that needs to be replaced remaining in a state of disrepair, no more parking passes, no more free coffee in the break room. It's good for a company to be frugal, but when they start nickel and diming, it's a sign that things are not going particularly well and they're just delaying the inevitable. Emails which clearly detail anything involving poor performance. Bill, like we discussed in your performance review, we'd really like to see improvement in areas X, Y, Z. Bill, thank you for meeting with me and discussing ways in which you could have conducted yesterday's meeting in a more professional manner. Bill, your dong is hanging out of your zipper. The trick is just setting an automatic response. I don't remember discussing this. A few jobs ago, my boss claimed he was going to make 25 sales in FY 2011, enterprise software. He made 2. He had also given me access to his Outlook calendar at one point. One day, I saw he had scheduled a meeting with HR the next day. The meeting was titled Metropolis PT31 Discussion. Another time, when I worked at a startup right before the 2008 bust, I received an Outlook meeting request on a Thursday afternoon. The meeting was titled Meeting and scheduled for Friday morning at 9 AM. Sometimes, the red flags are very red and very big. Metropolis 3, Metropolis Part 3, the third and last dance confirmed. They stop investing in you, no more training, you are not included on teams, requests for new hardware go unanswered, your offers of initiative fall on deaf ears. It feels like you are in an eerie calm before the storm. It feels like a breather, but it's because their focus has changed. Things are happening in the background. They are getting their ducks in a row, and it's done in secret because they still really want to surprise you. The storm will come. It's the meeting with you, your boss, and a person from HR. I had a HR person ask me, "Are you unhappy in your job?" to see if I would quit. Before all this started, they were double checking all my work. I had to walk a very thin line. I had a manager go around to the entire department and ask everyone about me so they could build a PIP. It was a real witch hunt. And all because they didn't want to pay severance. I work in IT, and when someone is being fired, I am notified a few minutes before the employee is told. We have a checklist: disable network and email credentials, then forcibly disconnect their connection sessions. So if you suddenly are kicked out of your email and can't connect to network resources, you are very likely being terminated very shortly. Fired or laid off before being fired, presumably for performance reasons, not something obvious like being busted dropping rabbit turds into the coffee pot. Most places with management that's worth a dang will give you an honest review and a chance to shape up. Many will give you more than one chance, depending on how easily you can be replaced. So, if you've had a sit down with your boss where underperformance was a key topic, Then don't be surprised when they come around your desk with a cardboard box and a security officer if you don't shape up. In the book The Long Walk by Stephen King, a group of young men are forced to walk above 5 kilometers HR in a contest to see who can go the longest. If you drop below 5 kilometers HR 3 times within a few hours, more to it than that, but you are shot by soldiers pacing you nearby from a Humvee. King repeatedly describes the rest of the walkers all moving away from someone once they've taken their second warning and it's clear they're about to get their ticket punched. I've always found the same thing happens in the workplace. You can tell when someone's going to get canned. If you know, no matter what, you're going to start pulling away. Every time this has happened to me, I've been fired. Every time I've noticed it happening to someone else, whether I knew it beforehand or not, they got fired. Out of every book short story that King has written, none has stuck with me more than this one. IT was creepier to read, and some other stories were better written, but The Long Walk was so nightmarish to me. I always recommend that story to people. I think a sign you're being displaced is silence. If you are used to a flood of communication, email, phone calls, etc. from someone, and suddenly that goes dead without explanation, then it's a sign the relationship is about to change drastically. Be that your boss firing you, you being moved to a new job in the company, a client cancelling their service. It means there is some intelligence you're not privy to on the other side, and you should brace yourself, prepare. If there is a change in upper level management, new executive VP, etc., it usually means there will be a significant reorganization coming and people will lose their jobs. It's the new exec VP's way of putting their stamp on the company. I am not kidding when I say good, highly effective, tenured employees are let go for no reason other than the new guy was on a ego trip and wanted to flex their muscle. Ah yes, the biannual executive poker game. I worked for a certain, now nearly defunct, company that every couple years did a reorg. At one point I worked for a manager who reported to a director who reported to a VP who reported to another VP who reported to yet another VP who reported to a president who reported to the CEO. If you find yourself posting a thread on Reddit asking for red flags that show you're getting fired, that's a big one. Plot twist, OP is Rahm Emanuel. I'll share my story of the time I was fired, not HR, just a lowly cable installer. About 6 months prior to my firing I had one negative performance review. Now in my, and everyone I worked with opinions, the standards were far too high to get positive customer reviews. Alas, there was nothing we could do about it. I was put on an improvement plan after the negative performance review, but nothing was mentioned of it after that. No follow-up meetings about performance, or where I stood on the plan. My supervisor was always a bit of a micromanager, so as far as I knew it never became more or less. Cut to the day of. I go to work a little early and clean my truck because it was a disaster. Go to check my jobs for the day and I had none. Didn't really think much of it, it had happened a bunch of times before. Try to swipe into the building and my ID wouldn't work. My stomach dropped. Went in and my supervisor asked for my iPad password and my locker combo. I asked him if there was anything I needed to know and he said no. Go to grab a coffee before clocking in and am cut off by my boss again and asked to step into his office where his boss and an hour lady were seated. You can guess what happened next. After it happened they asked for my ID and then told me I was trespassing on company property and I was to leave immediately. Asked to get my stuff out of my van and was told it would be mailed to me. Still haven't received everything. Probably won't. I hate the company with a freaking passion, and I'm still considering contacting the labor board about some concerns I have with certain labor practices they had us doing. 2 months before my office was closed, the top HR person at the Fortune 100 company I worked for sent out an email that the CEO of the company would be visiting every regional office in August, and was kind enough to include a schedule of said visits. Our office was not included. Just about everyone in our office replied and jokingly asked if it meant our office was being closed. She responded that the exclusion of the Portland branch was just an oversight. We later found out that those visits were to reassure the other branches that there would be no additional office closures. Bastards. I found out at the company picnic when they jokingly said my branch was closing in a skit. Only thing worse than that was the super lame injury delay in the volleyball game. Setting you up to fail. For example, repeatedly being set an impossible unachievable targets. This is how HR give themselves grounds to fire you. I was a young idiot at the time, and I'm not sure how I didn't see the layoff coming when I was accidentally CC'd on an email sent by the HR person that said, "What about Terrasaur? She's getting about $XXXX a month." Got laid off the next day. Assuming you're in an office, suddenly being left out of meetings, or not being assigned to projects, or finding your workload a lot lighter, are all signs you're not going to be working there much longer. Also, if you're asked to show a coworker, or worse, a new hire, how to do a major component of your job, you can be sure your last day is coming up soon. If you're not in an office, say retail, factory, food service, or labor, suddenly losing your overtime, being scheduled for fewer and fewer hours, or not being called in, all indicate you're either about to be replaced, or let go. And it probably goes without saying, but if your boss supervisor has suddenly started writing you up for any and all infractions, or has assigned someone to review your work, that's pretty clear evidence they are looking to get rid of you. Was asked to delineate my entire job when our kitchen got a new chef. I told them I'd be fricked if I was going to train my replacement and quit on the spot. I'm an IO psychology. One of the things we do is help create job descriptions for employers so that they can better find people to fit the job requirements. If anyone ever asks you to create a job description of what you do, you're probably halfway out the door. I have a master degree in IO and my management is aware of this, but yet, they keep doing stupid crap to tip me off that my job is on the line. They fail to realize I know every move they are going to make. My boss told me that a colleague of mine was near useless and just not improving. He asked me to write up a procedure for our department so that he could hold my colleague to it, with a view to pushing him out the door when he wasn't following it to the letter. I then made it a priority to help my colleague as he was a good guy who just needed a bit more guidance. We went out for lunch 3 days in a row and I discussed ways for him to improve his relationship with others. He always asked why I was so liked and got on so well with others, and talked about things he needed to do better. Everything I suggested was practical and achievable, not just you need to work harder or some balls. I never told him I was tasked with writing the procedure because I knew he would freak out and panic and crap. Anyway, he hasn't given the boss one reason to write him up since then, and the boss even said to me, "Gee, he's really lifted his game." I could have silently fricked him, but I chose to help him instead, and I'm really glad I did. I had a man I worked with named Kelly. He was an older guy that had worked there for some time and he helped me in the same way. I have never respected anyone more than I did Kelly. So from someone on the other end of this, thanks for being the good guy. In the corporate world, if you are put on a PIP, performance improvement plan, start looking for a job. This is the company documenting the fact that they've had performance issues with you and they are doing due diligence to make sure you can't sue them for wrongful termination later on. You'd be surprised how many times I hear people on PIPs say how they are going to improve and then get a promotion. That will never happen, ever. I used to manage Ecom at a retail store. It was technically my title, but I never did any management because I was only over like 3 people. Part of my job was to help set schedules, and my manager once told me that the best way to fire someone is to slowly take away their hours so they have to look for another job. Her thinking was that by the time you fired them, they would have been actively searching by then. However, this was not always the case. Yeah, that's pretty scummy. Sounds like a way to avoid talking to that person about it. If they transfer you into an entirely different job title without training, especially if that job title would benefit from being bilingual. I was working at Burger King at age 16, now 25, and was trained as a cashier drive-through attendant at an older location since the location I was hired to had yet to open. On the grand opening of the new location, I was scheduled to work the lunch shift with 2 other cashiers. The computers we trained on were much older than the system in the new BK, which had unresponsive touchscreens and menus that were different. About 10 minutes into my shift, after a 30-minute bike ride in the Arizona summer, I am drenched and wet, causing the touchscreens to barely operate. A large man with a very big family came up to my register and had a very complicated order with lots of substitutions and adjustments. I stumbled through the order, sweat dripping down my face and arms. It turns out, He owned the franchise. He instructed my manager to put me in the kitchen. Problem was, I wasn't trained in the kitchen, like at all. I went back there with zero training and asked the one guy that spoke English WTF I was supposed to do. He gave me a really quick rundown of how to load meat from the freezer into the meat cooking machine, and how to use a fryer. I worked the rest of my shift stumbling around, ruining a bunch of patties of meat, and burning french fries. The following day, I went in and saw that the schedule had been adjusted and I was scheduled from 5 hours to 2, and no other days that week. The next week I went back, and I was scheduled again for 2 hours on 1 day a week. I never went back, but I did steal a backpack full of frozen beef patties, in its original plastic bag, and ended up grilling them for my friends and I at a party a few days later. TLDR, if they don't like you, they might transfer you so you fail enough for them to justify cutting your hours to 2 a week. I had an EA, executive assistant, who was not performing, had not adapted to the work environment and her peers. She had come from a different industry and had only been there 6 weeks. I sat with her and had an open discussion as to why and if she felt as though she could improve. She was honest and said she didn't think it was the right role for her nor the suitable environment. I knew that she had some rather serious medical issues and was undergoing tests, which were quite expensive, so I agreed with her to allow her to stay in her role until the week prior to her probation period so she could continue to earn money to pay for her medical invoices and b. look for alternative work. She stepped up and did a really great job of her remaining time, however still wanted to leave, and it was very amicable. She was actually a really lovely lady who took a role, got herself into a situation that wasn't suitable and was honest about it. I'd rather deal with those circumstances every day than someone who's in butthole and being destructive of their personal brand. Sometimes you just have to treat people like humans. It's not hard. PS. Yes, I had the authority to enter into this agreement with her, and yes, it was discussed and agreed by the company. When my office was prepping for layoffs, they had everyone go into a room alone with the bosses and describe their day hour by hour, explaining exactly what their responsibilities were and how much time they spent on each. I was laid off from a small company. These are things that I noticed that were huge indicators that things were going south. Company cutting back on everything. Some examples. Cleaning services were reduced to once a month. We were forced to clean the place ourselves, switching to a cheaper but worse phone service. No more free coffee. Items and tools that need repairing but are not. Upper management coming by extremely often and holding an insane amount of meetings. Before crap went down, these guys would barely show up. They didn't work their percent. They were the owners. Secret meetings held by middle management. We would all usually come in at around 8:30 am. But one day the 3 managers came in at 9:50 at the very same time. It was so obvious they just had a meeting somewhere else. One of these managers was also laid off, and he mentioned to me that they were already discussing in that meeting who to lay off. Management proposed cutting down to a 4-day work week and 20% salary cut, but retracted its decision shortly after we all agreed to it. For me, work was just off. I was definitely doing stuff, but it seemed it was just for the sake of keeping busy. We felt that we were going nowhere. Bottom line, if you think something is off, then it probably is. Polish up your resume and apply for jobs. Try your best to not burn bridges so that you can get your references and letters of recommendation. And no matter how awesome the company is, don't get attached to it. If they have to lay you off, they won't think twice. If you get moved to a new team office and there's only you in there, you get given nothing or very little to do and an internet-facing terminal. They are waiting for you to hang yourself. Extra Ethernet cables lie strewn about the cubicle. I'm pretty late to the party, but I work in staffing for a large company and I didn't see this listed yet. If your position is listed as an active opening on your company's website and no one has mentioned growing the team, you'll be amazed how many people don't bother to look at internal job openings. But yeah, that's a pretty big red flag. In engineering, can you gather up all your data on the project you are working on and submit it to me by the end of the week? At the fast food restaurant I work at, there is an older gentleman that's been working there at least 9 years prior to my arrival last year. While he was apparently one of the fastest workers when he first got there, he is now elderly and only works once a week for a few hours cleaning the dining area. When I arrived I was one of the few bilingual workers, so whenever the head manager wanted to tell him something he asked me to translate because it was easier. 2 days ago he told me to let him know that he was now on call for this Saturday, as opposed to having a set time on the schedule like usual. Saturdays are our busiest days, so almost anyone that is available to work Saturdays works. I'm almost certain that his time here is now coming to an end, and I could tell he could from the face he made when I told him what on call meant. My dad is notorious for being a hard butt. If he likes you, he is on you all the time, calling you on your crap. Once he's determined that someone is not going to work out, he will just stop talking to you. I've told new hires before, don't worry if Jay's yelling at you. If Jay stops yelling at you, that's when you need to worry. I'm reminded of the "Doesn't She Look Tired" episode of Doctor Who. The way I knew things were circling the drain was when my higher ups began generating concern that I wasn't feeling well or was somehow disgruntled. I'd keep getting called in and kindly interrogated about if I was feeling okay and what could they do to make things easier for me. This was all under the guise of "we're all family here and we care." It wasn't until several recurrences of this little chat that I began to realize they were trying to build a case for subpar performance and burnout by using my own words as the testimony. I started responding to these concerned inquiries with cheery smiles and "everything's so great, thanks" in a kind of kiddie show announcer voice. When they realized I wasn't helping them dig my own grave, they had their superior fire me over the phone right before a massive blizzard hit NY. I mean, on the bright side, I didn't have to drive in a blizzard. This thread confuses me. My current job has done almost everything in this list towards me over the years, which does make me feel better that thinking I was going to be fired many times over the years was a rational sentiment to feel at the time. XD. Only been through one massive layoff and luckily survived. I knew crap was up because corporate came to visit, but did not bring breakfast burritos this time. So no breakfast burritos. Time to fire up that resume. One of the best pieces of work-related advice I have ever received and utilized. Pay careful attention how the spouses and or significant others of your boss and co-workers react to you and treat you. It is a really good window into the feelings and thoughts of those you work with regarding their opinion of you. Think back to your recent holiday parties and see if you can place any issues regarding this advice. How did they react when they were introduced to you? Did they come up and engage with you after the initial introduction? If you knew them already, did they spend any time catching up with you? The corollary to this is also true. Always take the opportunity to reach out to those spouses and significant others in politeness and friendship. When the boss's husband turns to her on the way home after a company function and says, "Tell me about that guy in the green shirt," like it or not, you are about to be significantly evaluated for good or bad. Sit back and take the "I don't give a frick" attitude towards worrying about your job security and what might happen. Do your job reasonably well. If you get fired, you get fired. Sometimes people doing crappy work and being twats do not get fired, and people doing quality work and contributing to get fired. Don't apply logic to the potential douchebaggery of a workplace. At my first workplace, the phones were managed from an overseas office. People knew to start packing when an updated contact list was distributed from HR and their name wasn't on it anymore. 2 days later, you'd get the tap on the shoulder. Due to time zone differences, the 2 days was as regular as clockwork. Gave us time to have good farewell lunches. One time some people's phones stopped working before the list arrived. What a spoiler. When you start getting formal performance counseling reprimands with documentation you're asked to sign, that's about it. They ask for what you're working on and copies of it. Bring an assistant that will help you, so you need to teach them for job. No new jobs are coming your way. Very little personal interaction. There shouldn't need to be any red flags. If you're potentially being fired, you should already know why. Your manager should have been counseling you along the way. Your manager failed to properly manage you. Except for bad managers, of course. It's extremely common for good workers to be promoted, but are bad at managing. Or they get caught up in their own work and forget about an employee or two and just let managing them go by the wayside. If you're working in a healthy organization, your manager should have clear expectations for you, and if you haven't been meeting them, then it should have been communicated to you clearly and specifically at least a couple of times. If you're genuinely worried about being let go out of the blue, then either you work at a screwed up place or possibly your company is having financial issues. I know that in some industries locations it's harder to get a new job than others, but in either of the cases I mentioned it's probably good in the long run for you to be out of there. I would say the vast majority of people do not work for healthy, rational, ethically functioning organizations. If you manage a team and need new staff but the upper managers will only let you hire temp contractors. I interviewed for a full-time position at a job, missed the position, and they tried to offer me a temp role and I declined because I can't afford the risk. I got called a few months later offering me a role that was temp to perm, and the manager kept assuring me that it was only temp to perm because they had previous staff leave suddenly and upper management wanted to start new people on contracts first. So stupid me takes the job. Then 4 months later they announce the entire team is being outsourced and it suddenly clicks why they would only let people be hired on contracts. Not my manager's fault. She honestly didn't know, but it pisses me off so much that they poached me from a permanent job knowing that there was no chance of me having a permanent job. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.